My grandfather used to tell me success is like a glacier. People only see what breaks the surface, but the real strength lies underneath. I never really understood what he meant until I became that hidden force myself. My name is Lena Moore, and for most of my life, I let people assume. I let them believe I was just the quiet girl from a modest Cuban bakery in Miami's Little Havana. They saw flour on my hands and missed the fire in my mind. My sister Carla certainly did. She always played the role of the star-sharp suits corporate job high-end parties. I didn't mind. I stayed in the background building something real. But the night she called me a poor waitress in front of her colleagues, that was the night everything changed. That night, her illusion cracked wide open because someone very important in that room didn't see me as the help. He saw me as his boss, and the look on Carla's face when the truth came out, it was unforgettable. But before we get to that moment, the gasp, the broken glass, the silence, I want to take you back to where it all started, to a warm kitchen, a flour-dusted ledger, and a little girl who knew exactly what she was worth. Back then, we lived in a narrow walk-up above our family's bakery on Calle Ocho. The scent of cinnamon and guava filled the walls, and the hum of the ovens was more constant than silence. That place wasn't just home. It was where I learned how the world worked. While other kids played hopscotch or ran through sprinklers, I stood on a milk crate behind the register, ringing up café con leche and pastelitos for neighbors who treated us like family. By 9, I could tally receipts faster than my uncle could key them in. By 13, I noticed our supplier was overcharging for vanilla extract and negotiated a better rate with a neighboring cafe. My grandfather would wave a grease-stained notepad at me and shout, "Números, mija," and I'd drop whatever I was doing to help him balance the books. "You got a business brain in a baker's body," he'd say, with pride in his eyes. I didn't realize it then, but those moments were shaping me into something powerful, someone who could read people as easily as profit margins. My parents, hardworking to their bones, scraped every penny to send me to NYU. I still remember the way my mother packed rice and beans into Tupperware so she could skip meals and save bus fare. My father, Hector, worked 16-hour days and never once complained. When I got the acceptance letter, they both cried, but only for a minute, then they got back to work. I carried that responsibility like a second skin. Every lecture I attended, every business case I cracked, I did it for them. At 23, I launched a microloan platform from my apartment, just me, a secondhand laptop, and a vision. I called it Solera Capital. The mission was simple: empower small businesses, especially those run by immigrants like my family, who were often overlooked by traditional banks. Word spread faster than I could hire staff. By the time I turned 28, Solera was valued in the millions. But I never posted about it, never announced it at family gatherings, not even when we signed our first 7-figure contract. It wasn't because I lacked pride. It was because I knew who I was. I didn't need applause to prove it. And part of me, I'll admit, was curious to see who really saw me even without the spotlight. Carla never did. To her, I was always the helper, the background character, the girl who ran a cute little app and brought empanadas to family functions. She had no idea that my company had been quietly licensing technology to her firm for over a year. She didn't know I'd been invited to meet their CEO. She didn't know I was already holding the pen that would sign the acquisition of her entire division. And when she sat across from me one night at dinner, swirling her wine with that trademark smirk, and said, "You're still doing that bakery and app thing, huh?" I just smiled. I had just received an email that morning. It was from James Valen, her firm's CEO. He wanted to meet me in person. He said he'd be attending her gala that weekend. And just like that, everything shifted. I knew what was coming. Carla didn't. And for the first time in years, I wasn't angry. I was ready. The week leading up to Carla's gala felt like the calm before a storm no one else saw coming. She sent out embossed invitations like royal decrees, listing herself as Senior Director of Strategy and Growth at Valen and Cross in bold gold print. At the family planning dinner, she played hostess with theatrical grace, assigning duties like a general preparing for battle. When she turned to me with that sugar-dipped steel in her voice and said, "Lena, since you've got experience with events and food service, would you mind coordinating the catering staff?" I just nodded. Everyone at the table smiled, even my mother, who clapped her hands and said, "Perfect choice, Lena knows logistics." I glanced across the table at my fiancé, Ryan. He looked uncomfortable, but didn't say a word. I wasn't surprised. That had become his habit: support me. In private, stay silent in public. Later that night, he pulled me aside and whispered, "You don't have to do this. We can make up an excuse. Say you've got a work emergency." But I just smiled. No, I told him, I want to help. After all, this is a big night for Carla. It should be perfect. What I didn't tell him was that only hours earlier, I'd received a confirmation from James Valen's assistant. He would be attending the gala personally, and he was looking forward to meeting me. Me, not Carla. The founder and CEO of the company that was about to own a controlling interest in his firm. I could have canceled the whole charade right then. I could have stepped into that room on Saturday night as a guest of honor. But something inside me wanted to see it through. Not out of malice, but because sometimes the truth needs the right moment to speak, and this moment had been building for years. Saturday came, and the Whitmore estate, Carla's chosen venue, was dripping in excess. Glass chandeliers reflected off polished marble, and every guest seemed to glisten under the Florida evening sun. I wore a simple black dress, hair pulled back, no jewelry. I moved through the kitchen, checking timelines, steadying nervous servers, reviewing Carla's obsessively detailed itinerary. She'd made last-minute changes again. Of course she had. I nodded, adjusted schedules, and kept the trays moving. At 7:15 p.m., Carla swept into the kitchen in a shimmering silk gown, barely glancing at me. "Lena, champagne service begins exactly at 8:15. Don't mess this up." I gave a slight nod, hiding a smile. Back outside, she floated through the party, sipping too much Prosecco and laughing just a little too hard at her co-workers' jokes. I passed by unnoticed, carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres. When I walked by her circle, I heard her laugh loud and cruel. "That's my sister Lena," she said, gesturing vaguely. "She's more comfortable with the staff, honestly. Poor thing." The group chuckled politely. No one questioned it, not yet. But just before I walked away, my phone buzzed. A message from my CFO, all signed. "We're greenlit. Official at 8:0. I checked the time, 7:59. My heart didn't race. It steadied. Everything was falling into place. At exactly 8:00 p.m., I slipped my phone back into my pocket and exhaled. The moment was here. I adjusted the tray in my hands and stepped into the crowd again, weaving through sharp suits and soft laughter crystal flutes, clinking lightly against each other. No one gave me a second look. That was the beauty of invisibility. People reveal themselves when they think you're not worth noticing. Carla had always depended on that illusion. She controlled the narrative, painting me as the underachieving sister with flour on her apron and two small dreams. And tonight, she was riding high-holding court like a queen, oblivious to the fact her throne was about to be repossessed. She stood near the center of the courtyard, surrounded by a ring of executives from Valen and Cross. I recognized a few of them, names I'd seen on acquisition documents, People who'd unknowingly approved software integrations from my company over the past year. I walked past them, offering canapés, silent and smiling. As I turned back toward the kitchen, I heard her voice louder than necessary. "We've always tried to help Lena," she said, swirling her champagne. "But some people just aren't built for the corporate world. She's more comfort zone, aprons and spreadsheets." Someone chuckled. Another murmured, "That's sweet, though." Then our mother, Rosa, added with a patronizing laugh, "We're actually thinking of helping her buy a small condo. Nothing fancy, but it would be something she could manage." My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't tighten. Instead, I felt something like clarity. I had spent so long staying quiet, not because I lacked power, but because I had always believed that the truth, when it arrived, should arrive unmistakably. And now it was on its way. At 8:03, a small murmur rippled through the front gate. A sleek black car pulled up, and a valet opened the door. Out stepped James Valen, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, every inch the commanding presence I remembered from our Zoom meetings. Carla nearly dropped her drink. She rushed toward him like a fan to a celebrity, her tone suddenly syrupy. "Mr. Valen, we are so honored you could join us." He gave her a tight smile and scanned the crowd. Then his eyes landed on me. For a brief moment, confusion flickered across his face, then recognition. I nodded once, subtle but certain. Carla, noticing the exchange, said quickly, "Oh, don't mind her. That's just my sister Lena. She's helping with service." She reached for his arm. "Let me show you the marketing materials I've put together." But James didn't move. He kept his eyes on me. "Isn't that—" he started. I passed my tray to a nearby waiter and stepped forward, calm and deliberate. "Good evening, James," I said with an even smile. His entire face lit up. "Lena Moore," he said, shaking my hand with both of his. "I didn't expect to see you serving drinks at your own celebration." Carla blinked. "Wait, what?" But James kept going. "Given the acquisition was finalized tonight, I assume this is the official announcement." I turned toward Carla. She was frozen. Her champagne glass trembled. We weren't even close to the climax yet, but the foundation beneath her world had just started to crack. The courtyard went quiet, like someone had hit a mute button on the entire party. Even the string quartet stopped mid-note. Every eye turned toward James and me. Carla's face had gone pale, her lips slightly parted, blinking like she was trying to reboot her reality. "Wait," she stammered. "This has to be a misunderstanding. She's a baker. She runs that little shop in Little Havana." James raised an eyebrow, amused but composed. "Mrs. Moore is also the founder and CEO of Solera Capital. As of 8 p.m. tonight, her firm holds a controlling interest in Valen and Cross." He turned to me with a quiet nod. "And by extension, her leadership now includes oversight of your department, Ms. Moore." The words landed like a gavel on stone. A few gasps escaped the crowd. I could see the head of partnerships whispering something to the head of HR. Carla didn't move. Then, as if on cue, her champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble. She didn't even look down. She just kept staring at me like I had sprouted wings. "This can't be," she said, voice cracking. "You can't be her. You've never even—" Her sentence trailed off into silence. "But I am," I said softly, and for the first time in years, I didn't shrink beneath her doubt. I rose above it. Ryan appeared beside me, his face pale and confused. "Lena," he said, barely audible. "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at him for a long second. "Would it have mattered?" I asked. "Would you have spoken up for me all those times your family laughed at me? Would it have changed anything if you knew I was wealthy?" His mouth opened, but nothing came out. That silence told me everything. James stepped in again, clearly sensing the awkward tension rippling through the air. Well, since so many of our senior partners are here tonight, perhaps now's the perfect time to make it official, he said, lifting his glass. To Solera Capital and its new chapter with Valen and Cross. People raised their drinks, some hesitantly, others already recalibrating their loyalties. I accepted the toast with a nod, then turned back to Carla. I believe you had a speech prepared for tonight, I said, holding her gaze. Would you still like to give it? Or shall I? Carla's eyes darted around the room. Every carefully curated guest she'd invited, every executive she wanted to impress, now looked at her differently. She turned and walked, fled out of the courtyard, disappearing into the house. Rosa followed quickly behind her face, flushed and unsure. As the applause died down, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything finally shifting. The quiet girl in the background was gone. I stepped forward, took the mic from the nearby podium, and tapped it gently. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice steady, if I could have your attention. What came next wouldn't just change my family. It would challenge everything they thought they knew about respect, legacy, and power. As I stood at the podium, the room still buzzing from the reveal, I let the silence settle around me like a second skin. For years, I had been quiet, careful not to disrupt the image my family had painted, but not tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lena Moore, founder and CEO of Solera Capital. Some of you may recognize that name. Some may not, and that's fine. For most of my life, I've been underestimated. I was told that I was too humble, too small, too ordinary for this world of power and prestige. Even my own family assumed my worth stopped at the bakery door. I paused, scanning the room. Some looked embarrassed, others curious, most just listened. Invisibility is powerful, I continued, because when people think you're nothing, they show you who they really are. And for years, I listened. I watched and I built, brick by brick, not for revenge, not to prove a point, but because I knew who I was, even if no one else did. I glanced toward the back, where my father Hector stood with a drink in hand, nodding slowly. He didn't smile, but his eyes were glassy. I knew what that meant. Pride without words. After the formalities wrapped up, the crowd started to disperse. Some guests approached me with sudden warmth in their voices. I had no idea, one whispered. Incredible story, said another. I thanked them, but my mind wasn't on them. It was on the people who had been there all along, but never truly saw me. Ryan lingered by the terrace, looking lost. He tried to catch my eye, but I turned away. There was nothing left to say. Rosa reappeared, her face tense, as she tried to gather Carla's things discreetly. She avoided my gaze, too. I didn't chase either of them. They had done enough running tonight. James Valen found me near the bar. I've seen plenty of boardroom takeovers, he said with a smile, but never one quite like this. That was something else. I nodded, offering a polite smile. Sometimes truth needs a little theater to break through the noise. He laughed and handed me a small envelope. Your board seat packet. It's official now. As the final guests left and the string quartet packed up their instruments, Carla appeared again. Her makeup was patched, her heels replaced with flats, but her fury hadn't softened. She walked straight to me. You humiliated me, she hissed low and sharp, in front of everyone I've worked years to impress. I didn't flinch. No, Carla, I said. You humiliated yourself. I just stopped covering for it. She took a step back, her eyes wet but burning. I'll resign. I won't work for you. I held her gaze. That's your choice. But before you walk away, understand this. Your behavior tonight will follow you long after this party ends. People saw who you really were when you thought no one important was watching. Her shoulders fell slightly, the first sign of uncertainty cracking through her rage. And in that moment, I knew this story wasn't just about power. It was about awakening. And hers had only just begun. Carla stood there frozen, like she couldn't decide whether to scream or cry. Her hands clenched at her sides, but she said nothing, just breathed heavily and stared at me as if seeing a stranger. I had seen that look before on countless faces over the years when perception finally cracked and truth bled through. Still a part of me, the part shaped by years of keeping peace, felt the old pull to soften the blow. But not this time. This wasn't cruelty. It was consequence. I don't expect you to work for me, I said, finally, my voice calm. I expect you to work for something bigger than yourself. Carla narrowed her eyes. What does that mean? I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough so the last few stragglers wouldn't hear. Starting Monday, you'll be working with our new Community Uplift Division. We're launching a program for small businesses, real ones like the bakery, and you'll be supporting the outreach team. She blinked, confused. Reporting to who? I held her gaze. Our mother. Carla laughed, but it came out thin and brittle. That's a joke. I shook my head. It's not. Mom still runs the bakery by choice. She's been leading the pilot program for 6 months. She understands the people we're trying to help. You'll learn from her just like I did. Her jaw tightened. You're doing this to humiliate me. No, I said, I'm doing this because you need to understand the value of work that doesn't wear a suit. You'll never respect people like me or people like her until you walk in their shoes. Behind us, Rosa appeared. Her face had aged 10 years in the span of one evening. Her voice cracked as she spoke. Lena, can we talk about this in private? We're still family. I turned to her slowly. Family, I echoed. For 3 years, you made me sit with the staff at weddings. You left me out of photos. You let Carla talk about me like I was your shame. When exactly did I count as family? Rosa's lips trembled. We didn't know. We didn't know you had money. I shook my head. That's the problem. You thought I had to be rich to deserve respect. A stillness fell between us. That was when my father Hector stepped forward. He'd been standing quietly all evening, drink in hand, eyes following every word. He cleared his throat, and when he spoke, his voice was low but steady. She's right, he said, looking at Rosa. We failed her. We let pride replace our values, and I let it happen. He turned to me now, eyes full of sorrow. I'm sorry, mija. It was the first apology that actually mattered. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the space where it could begin. Carla looked away, arms crossed, tight, the reality sinking in. Ryan, who had lingered near the door, finally stepped forward. His voice was barely above a whisper. Lena, can we talk? I looked at him, my face unreadable. The damage he'd done wasn't loud, but it was deep, and I wasn't sure he even understood the cost. But I knew that conversation had to happen, just not yet. Ryan's voice hung in the air, quiet and tentative, like he wasn't sure he had the right to speak. Maybe he didn't. I looked at him for a long moment. The man who once brought me flowers on Sundays, who said he admired my drive, now stood looking like a boy who'd misplaced his compass. We can talk, I said softly, but not tonight. His shoulders slumped a little, but he nodded. He knew. Somewhere deep down, he knew that what we had wasn't built to withstand this kind of truth, not because of the money, but because when I needed him to see me, to stand beside me, he didn't. And now that the world saw me differently, he was suddenly unsure of everything. That wasn't love. That was convenience dressed up as affection. The courtyard had mostly cleared out by now. Only a few guests remained, murmuring near the valet stand, unsure whether to say goodbye or pretend they hadn't just witnessed a family unravel. I looked around and took in the wreckage, empty champagne flutes, the faint scent of roses, Carla's shattered glass, still lying in shards near the marble planter. It felt symbolic. Her carefully crafted image had broken just as easily. James Valen gave me a quiet nod from across the room, then made his exit without ceremony. He knew better than to linger. The moment was mine now, and it wasn't about business anymore. This was personal. Rosa had drifted away somewhere inside the house. I imagined her sitting in a dim room, trying to piece together how the daughter she'd dismissed had become the woman running the empire. But I didn't chase her. Some truths take time to settle, and I wasn't going to smooth them over to make anyone more comfortable. My father, still nearby, touched my arm gently. "Come home tonight," he said. "Your mother made your favorite. She's not ready to say much, but she's trying." I nodded slowly. "I'll be there soon." He squeezed my hand and walked toward the car. I watched him go, the man who had always been quiet in the face of Carla's dominance, now beginning to find his voice. And then I was alone. For the first time all night, I let myself breathe. Really breathe. Not the kind of breath you take to stay composed, but the kind that fills you from the inside, like you've been holding it in for years. The lights around the courtyard flickered gently as the breeze picked up. I sat down on the edge of the fountain and looked up at the sky, past the palm fronds swaying softly past the noise, past the people who had always underestimated me. What now? I asked myself. What comes after the truth is no longer hidden. I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew one thing. This wasn't the end of something. It was the start of something far more honest. And maybe that's what real freedom feels like. 20 minutes later, I walked through the back door of the bakery, where the warmth of home met me like an old friend. The scent of cinnamon butter and guava filled the air, unchanged since childhood. My mother stood at the counter, hands dusted with flour, eyes tired but softer than I'd seen them in years. She didn't say much, just pushed a warm plate of empanadas toward me and nodded. We ate in silence, my father humming an old tune as he swept the floor. There was no applause, no spotlight, just peace. And for the first time, I realized that peace had been the goal all along. Not revenge, not validation, just to be seen, truly seen by the people who mattered. Betrayal teaches you who's loyal. Humility reveals who's real. And sometimes it takes being broken by those closest to you to finally rise whole. If there's one truth I've learned, it's this: don't fear being underestimated. Let it sharpen you. Let it teach you how to rise. Because when you rise without bitterness, you don't just rebuild, you redefine. If this story reminded you of a moment you found your strength in silence, I'd love to hear it. Share in the comments. And if you believe quiet power is still power, subscribe. Let's keep building that truth together.